A lot of his own MPs who are, trying to get elected into the Assemblée Nationale, the French Parliament, are not championing the fact that they are part of his party, it seems. So his personal brand is looking increasingly toxic and he's looking increasingly detached.
Emmanuel Macron decided to call a snap general election on the 9th of June. That's after his Renaissance party was defeated in the European elections. He stunned not only French voters but his own cabinet. In an interview the following Monday, the president acknowledged he'd thrown what he called an unpinned grenade at their feet. He is obviously hoping to galvanise voters against Marine Le Pen's far-right party, which has been gaining in popularity. Let's now talk to the international journalist, former Europe editor for CNN, Nina Dos Santos. Hello to you, Nina.
Thanks so much for having me. Hi.
Lovely to have you here in the studio, Nina. Give me your thoughts, Nina, on Macron's gamble. Is it looking now like a losing bet?
It's looking worse and worse, actually. In fact, various surveys appear to show that his party is still in third position here. And so it looks as though that lead for the far right and now also the far left entering this race is crystallising, and he's in third position. A lot of his own MPs who are, trying to get elected into the Assemblée Nationale, the French Parliament, are not championing the fact that they are part of his party, it seems. So his personal brand is looking increasingly toxic and he's looking increasingly detached.
Okay, there's some parallels there that we won't go into again here today. I wonder why he thought it was a good idea. Were his advisors suggesting it was a good idea? Because as soon as he announced it, it was seen as being reckless. It was seen as being politically suicidal. Who thought it was a good idea?
Nobody seems to know. What we know is that we haven't yet heard any members of the French cabinet coming out in support of him. What we know is that obviously he spent the last couple of days at the G7 summit. He spent a lot of time in the company of international leaders talking about international affairs and not domestic politics. And this is obviously what is punishing him and his party in the polls at the moment. And we haven't heard any of his members of the cabinet talking out in support of this decision at all, or even elucidating the public on why he might have decided to do it. We still think probably the best case scenario is that what he's trying to do is at least give the French population a chance to vote on it first and in second rounds. They vote very differently at first and second rounds, that we know.
Yes.
And then maybe he's giving the far right a chance to have a go at governing, and if they mess it up, well, then the centrist movement might come back and prevail, come back from the brink, but it's looking unlikely.
You'd imagine he'd have tried those theories out on some of his close colleagues.
Or maybe he just didn't.
Leaping.
Maybe he didn't discuss it with a wide circle of advisors. I mean, this is a question that we have here in the UK, with Rishi Sunak having decided to go early on his election against the views of many of the own MPs of his party.
Yeah, precisely. That's what I meant by the obvious parallels. Look, we've seen in previous French elections, more than one on a number of French elections. You mentioned the elections come in two waves. There's a first round, and then the French voter gets a chance to think about what they've done and maybe change their minds. And they have in past elections, going back to the time of Marine Le Pen's father, Jean-Marie Le Pen, when that far-right party was the Front National, the National Front. French voters said, look, a lot of them supported the National Front in the first vote and then recoiled in the second vote. This time, it doesn't look as if that's necessarily going to happen. Is that about Marine Le Pen? Jean-Marie Le Pen's daughter rebranding the party?
I think it's partly that. Yes, she's really, really focused on trying to make the what was the National Front, the National Rally it's called now. By the way, she's renamed her party. So has Emmanuel Macron as well. She's tried to sort of focus the brand on being a mainstream, eminently reasonable party. It doesn't hold its rallies in, Nord-Pas-de-Calais, in the gritty, industrial heartlands of northern France. No. It hosts them in salons, in the nice quarters of Paris. And that's what it's trying to do, garner any of those sort of tones of xenophobia, Islamophobia,
Entirely.
Supposedly. But, and this is the big story of the day, it's obviously that Kylian Mbappe and various other sports stars have decided to come out and use their platform at a time when obviously everybody's watching the Euros and football to say, French people, please sit up and try not to vote for the extremes, in particular the far right, because they're still the same people as they were a few electoral cycles ago. who knows? But also, it's not just the far right that French voters are having to contend with. We've also got an alliance on the left that includes the far left that has some very unpalatable views on things as well. And according to the latest sets of polls, it's looking as though the far right, if we have the National Rally Party assembling itself with elements of the Gaullist Republican Party, which has been split now on this idea of trying to get into bed with the far right, they could get about 30 to 33% of the vote. Then you'd have a coalition of socialist left-wing parties that could include the far left of Jean-Luc Mélenchon, and they would get about 25%, and Macron would be in third position between 18 and 20%, given the polling data today.
Yes, interesting. Ears pricked up when you said what you said about Kylian Mbappe coming out in that way. I instantly conjured up an image in my mind of Taylor Swift in America. Obviously, he's a footballer, she's a pop star, but they've got the similar kind of punching pop
Dating
star
American
power.
footballer, though, I believe she is.
Well, so she is. So she is. I wonder if Kylian Mbappe is going to win over or win back many hearts and minds. And you've got big politicians of the past giving the same sort of message. You got Sarkozy, you've got Francois Hollande, although both in their different ways, they're rather discredited, aren't they?
Well, this is true. I mean, I think there's the executive presidency of France is that. It's an executive presidency. Obviously, Francois Hollande didn't get a second term. He was discredited because of his interesting personal life and so on and so forth. He'd already plunged in the polls then. Beforehand, he didn't get a second term. But people like Sarkozy were very much sort of imperious French presidents. And I think that's sort of the price that Emmanuel Macron is paying for here. But what he's also done in creating this centrist movement is that he's kind of torpedoed the left, traditional centre-left and centre-right of French politics. And that's having a massive effect, not just in France, on the rest of Europe as well. Many centre-right parties blame Emmanuel Macron for having torpedoed the middle ground and allowed the far right here across not just France but other parts of Europe to rise in the ascendancy as a result. And what I would say is, even if the National Rally does get through the first round, the second round, or it's a leftist alliance, either way, neither of them look like they have very solid economic footing. The FT is saying that if the National Rally actually gets into the French Parliament, even for just 2 years, it could be the same effect that Liz Truss had on the UK economy, but twice as bad.
Right. Well, that's pretty bad.
Yeah, exactly. And if you look at the one of the main French think tanks had a look at the budget calculations of the far left. So if we have this leftist alliance that manages to prevail, well, their budget is about 250 billion euros out of line as well. So that could also have a major effect on the French economy. And all of this could have a major effect on the Eurozone, the single currency as well.
Right. So if President Macron's aim, we can only guess about his aim, can't we? But if part of his aim is to shake things up and show people, give them a glimpse of what life would be like under far-right leadership, say, well, maybe the message to President Macron is be careful what you wish for.
Well, I mean, take a look at what happened in Liz Truss's 49-day government. People in this country are still paying the price for that. Higher interest rates, can get set in stone pretty quickly when they have to go up. That would have an effect not just for the people of France. It would have an effect for the rest of the Eurozone as well, because obviously they share a single currency together. And France has traditionally, over successive governments left and right, had this issue with not being willing or able to bring down high deficits. It's a country that traditionally spends an awful lot on the state. You can imagine if you have Marine Le Pen in power, how much more they'd be spending, or Jean-Luc Mélenchon pulling the levers of power from the far left on the other side.
Let's just peer for a moment into the campaign ahead. And you've got someone like Kylian Mbappe trying to warn the people of France that don't buy into the idea that this party of Marine Le Pen is a new party. He says they're still the old party. Well, they're obviously going to campaign in a quite different way to the old National Front. So what will that campaign look like if it's no longer, as it were, anti-Islam, if it's no longer about withdrawing from the European Union, which is what Jean-Marie Le Pen used to argue about, then what are they going to be pushing? What's the campaign?
Well, we've already seen elements of what the campaign is. And by the way, the reason people like Kylian Mbappe are getting involved here is because it's young voters who've been mobilised by the figure of Jordan Bardella, this 28-year-old youthful leader that Marine Le Pen has, brought up in the ranks here to be the figurehead. He's got millions of followers on platforms
like... A third of French voters.
On TikTok, especially mobilised a lot of 18-year-olds who've left school to come and vote for him. And so one of the reasons why it's important that these figures of popular sport and culture feel like they have to get involved here is to kind of capitalise on the youth vote and try and make the youth vote realise what is at stake here. That's probably why he's gotten involved. But we've already had an idea of what their policies would be. It would be going head to head with the EU on things like state subsidies for French firms. It would be boosting the agricultural sector, which, as we know, is sacrosanct in France and very emotive. And, obviously it would be rather unpalatable policies towards anybody who's a migrant inside France. But remember that France also has a very large population of second and third generation born North African people originally from North African origin, and they feel decidedly uncomfortable, and also people, who are from Francophone Africa as well, and they feel extremely uncomfortable with the undertones of the Le Pen, movement, whichever generation it is.
All right. Nina Dos Santos, so good to get your analysis. Do come back and see us again.